Barcelona. Okay, thank you. Thank you. The meeting is recorded, so there will be a dissemination at the international level. Before giving the floor to Roger, I want to express my gratulations because IEMED was ranked as one of the best think tank in Western countries. There is in the annual report published in the United States every year at the end of January. They publish the best think tank in the world, and the IEMED was ranked as the best think tank in Western Europe. And so, Roger, it's really a great thing. You can go in the website and see Global Think Tank 2020. Usually it's published at the end of January, January 28th. Okay, Roger, to you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Ricceri. Thank you for this wonderful invitation, opportunity. Can you hear me well? Okay, perfect.
Very well.
Today I'm not in the office. With the pandemic, we have a system.
Sorry,
we are rotating, so I'm at home.
Roger, one moment. All the other, please close, disactivate microphone.
Excellent.
So we listen better. Okay.
Well, then allow me first of all to thank the organizers of this marathon of academic exchanges and academic sessions, in particular l'Université Le Havre and the other academic colleagues. Allow me to also to thank Professor Ricceri from EURISPES think tank for this invitation, and allow me to express how happy I am and how satisfied I am to be among very good friends and long-standing friends like Giuseppe and Francesca, among others. I would also like to praise this session, because even if the Congress is on the rise of Asia, it is very rewarding to discuss the rise of Asia and how the Mediterranean region is interacting in this process. Because as we will see later on, I think that Francesca will actually speak about it. The Mediterranean region has gained a lot of traction in the last 10 years among many Asian nations, and we can see that in various fields, from transport and logistics to energy and telecommunications. So studying the relations between the Asian nations and the Mediterranean region as a whole, even if some of these Asian nations do not understand the Mediterranean region as a unity, is increasingly more important, and that's why I would like to congratulate the organizers of the conference for placing such an important topic in the agenda. But as Professor Ricceri already mentioned, I was asked to speak about the challenges of the post-COVID-19 Mediterranean societies. And here I need to begin by stating how devastating this pandemic has been and is still, because we're still within the waves of the pandemic for the Mediterranean countries in general, and particularly for the southern Mediterranean countries. Southern Mediterranean economies have contracted throughout this year 2020 for more than 5% in countries like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia and Jordan, we see that very clearly in other countries which are still struggling or are in conflicts, both political, military, that go beyond the scope of the pandemic. This contraction is, of course, more severe. I'm talking about countries like Libya, Lebanon, or Syria. In this regard, the only country that has experienced positive economic growth throughout this 2020 is Egypt, with an estimated growth rate of more than 2%. And that has to do mainly with the macroeconomic adjustments that the country undertook prior to the pandemic, and the flexible and weak lockdown measures that the country implemented during the pandemic, when other countries like, for instance, Morocco and Jordan actually implemented much harsher measures to close the economy and therefore to control the spread of the virus. However, it would not be right to state that this precarious situation, the precarious situation that the southern Mediterranean region is facing, is solely a consequence of the pandemic, because we all know that the southern Mediterranean countries are confronted with a number of structural problems or crises that hinder its human sustainable development, and that for the last 2 decades, at least, economic growth in these countries has not been inclusive enough. And therefore, this situation has brought in some very severe consequences. If I had to highlight 5 areas in which these crises are concentrated, I would mention, first of all, the situation of labor markets in these countries. As you know, labor markets are unable to create sufficient jobs, especially for young people. This situation is very severe among young people, and in particular, among young people, the young graduates are the ones that that more regularly cannot find enough labor demand. This is a very critical factor, as you can imagine, that pushes young people to emigrate, sometimes in very depauperated conditions. And it has become, from my point of view and my understanding, as the main political security and socioeconomic challenge that somehow challenges the stability in these countries. We have seen that youth unemployment rate has remained stable, if not has increased in the last 10 years, since 2011. When the Arab raisings at around 30%. And it is, in fact, if we look at data disaggregated in geographic regions, it is the highest figure across the globe. So 30% at least of young people are being unemployed. Of course, this is it's a very high figure to be sustained over time, as it has happened. Second of all, if I also had to highlight a second area in which these structural problems or crises actually happened, I would mention informal economy. Informal economy is still too big in most of the countries of the southern Mediterranean. For instance, in some countries like Lebanon, informal economy tops the 34% of the GNP, 34% of the GNP, and actually involves nearly 70% of the labor market. In other countries like for instance Morocco, this figure is slightly lower, 60%, but yet it's a very high figure. And informal economy triggers precariousness mainly, and this possesses citizens from social protection, labor, and social rights. And of course, if we look at the current situation and the situation that we have witnessed since March 2020, what many countries have actually been doing is to increase the level of social protection to contend, of course, the effects, the socioeconomic effects of the pandemic. In countries where the informal economy is simply too big, well, the role of the state in this regard is diminished, and of course, this triggers social precariousness for the groups of population that normally are the most vulnerable groups that are part of the informal economy. Third of all, well, the female labor participation rate is extremely low. It's the lowest in the world as well. As we said, well, youth unemployment rate is the highest. Female labor participation rate is the lowest. Sometimes up to 50 points below the male labor participation rate. Look at the case of Algeria, which is in this particular regard is the worst. Of course, this has some pervasive effects over the economy, and it also limits the capacity of women to contribute to the economic growth, to the economic activity. It limits, therefore, the capacity of these countries to grow at its full potential. And not only this, I mean, the low rates of female labor participation also limits the capacity of women to act as independent citizens. And of course, this trend, this feature, is many times aggravated by legal frameworks that do not always guarantee gender equality. This is also a big problem. Fourth, I would mention the role that MSMEs, so micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, actually have in these economies, because MSMEs, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, represent around 95% of the economic tissue in these economies. This is, of course, in terms of job creation. They reach the 60% of the total employment in these economies, but 95% of the economic tissue in the Southern Med countries is occupied by MSMEs. And the problem that MSMEs face is mainly their lack of access to finance, to funding. You know that for companies, especially for micro companies, to grow, to prevail as companies, to resist, they need to have access to funding. Otherwise, they will sooner or later they will die. And that is the problems. That is the main problem that these economies face. That MSMEs do not have access to funding, nor have access to international markets. And this is also another big problem. In Egypt, for instance, only 6% of MSMEs have regular access to funding. While the rest, they simply do not have access to banking finance, for instance. And 95% of MSMEs do not have the capacity to export. In Morocco, on the contrary, the situation of MSMEs is slightly better. So 18% of MSMEs have regular access to funding, but yet there's still a huge majority of MSMEs who are simply left out of the banking finance. If we look at figures of how MSMEs actually benefit or do not benefit from global or regional value chains, you know that there has been a big discussion on how to propel MSMEs in the region so that they can actually benefit from the insertion, from the participation into global and regional value chains. Well, we will see that the figure is really low. I mean, only 0.4% of SMEs in the region benefit from global or regional value chains. In fact, one of the consequences of the pandemic is now, and this is something that both the Union for the Mediterranean and also the European Commission are looking into it, and other institutions like OECD, is how to promote a nearshoring of production. Like with the disruption of the global value chains, there is at least a will to bring certain production and to relocate certain production from Asia into the southern Mediterranean countries. But yet, when we see the current figures, these are still very low. And fifth and last, I would like to raise the issue of public governance. I spoke about youth unemployment. I spoke about informal economy. I spoke about female labor participation rate and discriminatory practices against women in the region. I spoke about MSMEs that have problems to access funding and international markets. And finally, there is a cost-cutting issue, a horizontal issue that embraces the others, which is the quality of the public governance. And there we clearly see two main problems. One is corruption, is widespread corruption. This is not new. This is, of course, not due to the effects of the pandemic, but of course, corruption it not only attacks the rule of law and the democratic systems, but it also distorts the private sector development, and it also hampers the attraction of foreign investment. And this is a big problem, because corruption, which is not only a phenomenon of the southern Mediterranean countries. I mean, in most of our countries, be it Spain or Italy or Greece or France, we have to fight corruption. But in the southern Med countries, this is an aggravated problem. And finally, related to public governance, there is also a problem in the implementation phase of public policies. This we have seen in the last 4 to 5 years that some of the countries of the South Med, I'm thinking about Tunisia, Morocco, those that have pushed for further reforms, they have adopted in some cases very ambitious legislation. But then when you analyze, when you assess how this public policy is being executed, is being implemented, well, you see that there are some shortages that, of course, need to be corrected as well in the future. Well, these are the 5 main critical areas that I would identify in terms of human development and what prevents human development to advance in the region. Of course, the pandemic is aggravating all the human development indicators, and it's still too early. But we have already reviewed a few reports and analyses from the OECD, from the World Bank, from the International Monetary Fund. I know that the UFM Secretariat is also working on a very ambitious report on the effects of the pandemic in the areas of cooperation. And what we see is that indicators such as extreme poverty and inequality, which already had an upward trend since 2015 in the region. I mean, in most of the regions of the world, these two indicators, extreme poverty and inequalities, have improved since 2015 until the beginning of the pandemic. What we see is that in the MENA region at large, and therefore also in the southern Mediterranean countries, these two indicators have worsened since 2015. So basically, what is happening now with the pandemic is that we are starting to see the effects in terms of higher rates of extreme poverty, and higher degree of inequality, of income inequality within those countries. That's why, and with that, I will conclude that the role of the international and the regional organizations is really key and is really crucial at the moment. We have seen how the Union for the Mediterranean keeps on, and hopefully Giuseppe will enlighten us more in this endeavor. But how the Union for the Mediterranean keeps on implementing the projects and keeps on organizing the political dialogue between the member states. We have also seen how a couple of days ago, as you probably noticed, the European Commission launched the new joint communication of the European Commission and the High Representative on the renewed European neighborhood policy, which basically tries to build on what is happening at the moment with regards to the pandemic, and tries to devise new instruments to foster more cooperation, both at the bilateral level between the European Union and each of the southern neighborhood countries, but also at the regional level. However, and with that I will conclude. What I really lack is a long-term vision. We know that the amount of challenges is increasing. I have now had a chance to basically devise 5 or 6 areas in which I consider that need to be tackled if we want to move on. But yet, I have my own vision, but I don't see a long-term vision of how this Mediterranean and Euro-Mediterranean cooperation should be structured in the long term. I see lots of policies, lots of programs, lots of instruments that aim at correcting some of these shortages, that aim at improving some of these challenges, that help the countries in the South Med to basically overcome some of the effects of the pandemic. But I don't see in any official document how these relations and how this cooperation should look like, let's say, after 2030. And therefore, this is, I will not, because I don't have the time now, and that would probably require another intervention from my side, and I want to listen to the other speakers. But I would therefore leave this question open on the table. How do we want this cooperation, this relationship between the Southern Mediterranean countries and the European Union and the Northern Mediterranean countries to look like in 10 to 20 years? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. You put on the table really a very important topic, facing from one side the structural weakness of the countries and the lack of a common vision about, in long term, about the future. This is really an important topic. The second speaker, I see Enrico Molinaro connected. Enrico Molinaro, we talk about collective identity and the Euromed cooperation revival. Enrico Molinaro is the Secretary General of Italian Network for Euro-Mediterranean Dialogue, RIDE APS, head of the Anna Lindh Foundation Network in Italy. Enrico, the floor is yours. 15 minutes, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so thank you, everybody. I apologize, I couldn't connect before, and I thank Marco Ricceri for helping me with his assistant to get through this problem. So I would like to explain the strategy of the of the association, the network, the Italian network for the Euro-Mediterranean Dialogue, which is a startup born on June 12, 2017. But we already succeeded to do some activities that have a strategic impact. But also, I would like to speak in the last 5 minutes as a scholar and from the individual point of view, out of the results of many years of work in this field. So from the point of view of my network, of which I am the Secretary General, we read carefully the declaration, the Barcelona Declaration of 1995, and we did not find any hint, any possible authorization to create a proliferation of institutions working in the Mediterranean who don't cooperate with each other, who don't have a strategic joint plan together, especially because they're using the same public funding from the European Union who co-fund those organizations. So this is why we started a strategy to put together the leaders of these organizations in physical contact with meetings that started on May 15, 2019 in Palermo, where we invited, and Giuseppe Provenzano was with us, on the occasion of the second World Conference on the Mediterranean Diet. The leader of the Union for the Mediterranean, Ambassador Kamel, and the leader of our foundation, Annalyn Foundation, Nabila Sharif, which started an unprecedented plan of joint action. In particular, Nasser Kamel said this could be the best opportunity would be the 26th anniversary of the Barcelona Declaration. So immediately after that meeting, we had a meeting on December 6, 2019 at the Italian Foreign Ministry, where the leaders of these two institutions were joined by the leaders of two other institutions, the Prima Foundation, which has 19 countries, Euromed members, led by Professor Riccaboni in Barcelona, and Ambassador Moratinos, who is the High Representative of the UNAOC, but also one of the founders of the Barcelona Declaration. He told us some very interesting aspects of the preparation negotiations in Barcelona 25 years ago. So this idea from Nasser Kamel to organize a joint program was confirmed in the Euromed ecosystem, as he said, as he called it. And then we had another meeting in a little island of the Mediterranean, south of Rome, called Ponza. One of the municipalities, one of our members, because we have a very qualified membership with the municipalities and public and private universities, research centers, including EURISPES with Marco Ricceri and many others. So basically, in this meeting, the four partners decided to sign a common manifesto for sustainability, because we chose sustainability, in particular the three issues which represent the goals of the Prima Foundation: food security, circular economy, and climate change, as the connection point between these four organizations. And we decided to launch a manifesto using the same term that in 1941, 8 years ago, Altiero Spinelli was confined both in Ponza and then deported to Ventotene in 1937-39 in Ponza and 39-43 in Ventotene. He launched the first idea of the Manifesto for the Free Europe. So it was intentional connection, because we wanted to get inspiration from those ideas. And we have started a new activity, in particular with the help of the UFM Secretariat and the Prima Foundation, but again, with cooperation with the UNAOC and the Annali Foundation. We are also involving the UNESCO through the Deputy Director General Giannini in this program. I don't mention the Italian authorities, I'm only mentioning the Euromed institutions. Next event of this annual Ponza Prima Med initiative will be held in Ventotene Island on September the 4th. By the way, you're all invited, not only Giuseppe and Marco, but all of you. We will be very happy to host you there because it's a very symbolic place, and both the President of the European Commission and the European Parliament mentioned very often the Ventotene Island Manifesto. So basically our idea is to go back to the spirit of Barcelona, because we believe that there are still principles and goals that are not yet fulfilled, and we believe that there is an inspiration also because Barcelona has very strong practical and concrete approach. You don't find in Barcelona Declaration in any point abstract ideas of dialogue and friendship with just blah 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 and no contents, but it's very practical oriented, especially in terms of sustainability and job creation. From this point of view, we found an excellent partner in Giuseppe Provenzano, because he's helping us to put into all our projects and initiatives the element of the fight against labor mismatch, which is the gap between the high qualified education and the real trend markets. This is about Ponza Prima Med, where we are establishing in the Ponza Island the first Euromed laboratory on sustainability in a villa that belongs to the Lazio region. And we will meet with our Palestinian and Egyptian partners who won with us a tender from a call from the Annali Foundation for this purpose. And also in other projects such as Scena Mediterranea, a French-Italian project on the ancient Greek and Roman theaters. And the third initiative is what we call the Identity Cuisine, because we believe that facing the COVID-19 challenge, it's important to invest on therapies and on secondary prevention, which is medical prophylaxis, like the masks and the vaccines, but also it's important to invest on the primary prevention, which is the lifestyle and especially the memories of our grandmothers who have some balanced natural cuisine that were more healthy and more effective on our immunological system. So basically, we succeeded in pushing for these projects in order to convince, especially the Annali Foundation, to invest the European Union money, 9 million euros, in order to have more practical and concrete results from the activities, especially the so-called flagship projects. Now, let me tell you 5 minutes about my specific ideas. All our projects, including the statute of the Italian network, is focused on the issue of collective identity. And this is a multidisciplinary concept because it's based on anthropology, sociology, and political science. So what we want to say is that in our vision, there are two basic models of identity. The what we call the Westphalia state-oriented model and the globalist opposite model. Now, if we take into consideration, for instance, the BRICS group on which Marco Ricceri is leading a multidisciplinary strategic group of research, we believe that the common point, the common denominator among all of them is to have a Westphalia model approach. This we came to this conclusion studying the terminology, the glossary of these groups. By the way, I don't know if I succeed to put now to share the screen to show you this glossary that we try to propose in our study. Just a second. I try, okay? Can you see it? This is an analysis of the terminology used between the two opposite models of identity. the two elites. I don't know if you can see it. According to
we can see well. We see.
You see, okay. The culture and political identity. I don't have the time now to show you in details because my time is running, but you can see in security, religious identity, economy. So all these aspects have a totally opposite way of approach to the reality. This helps you to understand why the conflict between different groups and countries and governments goes beyond what to appear, what one could expect from the media. And this is totally different way of thinking. For instance, the Underlying Foundation, currently, I would put them in the context of the globalist approach. Let's say, in a way, the opposite of the BRICS group. By the way, the good point of Marco Ricceri work is that we focus on the BRICS group. We don't want to understand only the 5 countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but we try to understand as a group, especially in the G20, in the G20 context, how they behave together. And they have a common approach, even though after Bolsonaro was elected in Brazil, of course, there was a change, and because Bolsonaro was closer to Trump globalist approach. But again, now probably the situation will change after Biden's election. And this kind of magic glasses help you to understand also the trends in the future, because in 2014, I happened to write, to publish an article in the Italian Geopolitics review, Limes, saying that immediately after the so-called Arab Spring, I thought that the Westphalia model of Assad was going to lead Syria until today. In a moment when everybody was sure that Assad was lost and there were a division of Syria, but I said that Putin Westphalia approach shared with Assad would make him lead again Syria until today. An opposite model we can find it in Turkey, where the Ataturk approach that dismantled the Sultanate and the Caliphate with a secular Westphalia model approach, where the boundary keeps together all the Turkish people, is just reversed the other way around now by Erdogan, which is using the religious globalist identity model by replacing, even in the schools, in the Turkish schools, the image of Ataturk. These are just very quick examples, because I have only 1 minute just to explain you that we can play with this model in order to understand the reality in an innovative way, and possibly also to understand the trends. I will give you a last example of this ability to use it when I had meetings at the Foreign Minister of Italy about the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the idea was that after the Abraham Agreement, not by chance, Abraham, is a model of religious globalist approach, there was not much chance, for in Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, because nobody cared about this Westphalia approach of the two states. But I said that the trend was in the direction of the Westphalia in this moment, according to these cycles of geopolitics. And in fact, this is what happened with the election of Biden. And now, there was an appeal by the Foreign Ministry of France and Germany and Egypt and Jordan to Biden in order to revive the Arab-Israeli conflict negotiations. So thank you for your attention. I hope I was clear enough. I realize it is very innovative, but I'm ready to give you any explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrico. We will disseminate this card to everybody. So, and just to continue the reflection. Now we have Francesca Manenti from CESI. CESI is a very qualified international Center for International Studies. She will talk about the China and the Mediterranean Sea, the Beijing pragmatic approach to the region. Francesca, up to you.
Thank you very much. I would like, first of all, to thank Professor Ricceri for inviting me and joining this very high and super qualified panel of experts for discussing about Mediterranean. I am a senior analyst of CESI for Asia, so my perspective will be more how much Mediterranean has increased its importance in the side of Asian actors, and especially, of course, in the side of China. And I would like also to thank the organizer of this conference, because it's absolutely well timing and effective for making people think more about Asia, that sometimes is perceived as a geographic place too much far from us for being interest to our everyday life. And I would like to share with you some hints today for reflecting about the fact that it's probably not at all in this case. I will try to be also very short in order to try to have space for discussions after these few hints that I would like to share with you. So just for start, when we speak about China in the Mediterranean, we have to consider that effectively China has tried to establish diplomatic relations with Mediterranean countries, or effectively has established relations with Mediterranean countries since a long time now, but it's just in the last 10 years that the presence of China has grown effectively inside the Mediterranean basin. Probably we have all heard about the Belt and Road Initiative that the President Xi Jinping launched in 2013, that is this global project that China launched for trying to present a different way of thinking and a different way of managing the international order in the first place. Belt and Road Initiative is a global project that starts in Beijing and involves countries in all the continents, but that has a very focused, a strong focus on the Mediterranean area. Why? Because ideally, for China, the Belt and Road Initiative needs to link China to the West, and especially to Europe, the Eurasian continent. And if we have the map, the geographical map in mind, the Mediterranean region is in the very heart of the connection between these, three regions: Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. So China started to realize the importance of this region also for its stakes. What we have to take into consideration is with a kind of approach China is engaging more and more, or has engaged more and more in the Mediterranean region. What we have seen in these last 7 years is a substantial inhomogeneity of the approach of China in the Mediterranean. Why? Because there is not an approach towards the Mediterranean, but there is a interest of China inside the Mediterranean. If we see once again to the Belt and Road, if you consider the Belt and Road Initiative, we can indeed underline this aspect, because first of all, what is the Belt and Road Initiative, and what is the drive that pushed China to have a stronger engagement with the Mediterranean region, the international commerce, the will to sustain the from between in this region. The exchange from Beijing to the Mediterranean in the last 20 years has increased very much. I have some data here just for giving you an example. There are like more or less $500 billion in exchange in 2019 between China and the Mediterranean. Of course, 2020 changed the global exchanges and the globalization. So nowadays the data are less effective than this, but this can give you the measure of how much China was interested in the first place to think how to sustain these big exchanges. And this went through the investment in ports and logistics that in China's perspective was very much the first pillar for sustaining this increase in exchanging with the Mediterranean region. But the fact that China was, like goal-driven for engaging the Mediterranean region produced also the fact that the speed with which China succeeded in being present in the region varied a lot. If we consider the southern shore, the eastern shore, and the northern shore of the Mediterranean, meaning the Mediterranean countries of the European Union, we can see a complete different presence and a complete different stakes of China in these three regions. There were a document recently released by the European Union stating that China has invested more or less 46 billion of euros in the European Union coastal states, and even if the attention of China also for the other two shores are very high, the condition, the social condition, political condition, economical condition also, and security condition, of course, impacted on how much and how effectively China succeed in having this kind of investment also in North Africa and Middle East countries. Another point to be taken into consideration is that has China had a goal-driven approach toward the Mediterranean region? Is perceived by the fact that we can see an adaptation of the priorities of China toward the Mediterranean, evolving the China's global strategy in a whole and overall. Why am I telling that? Because we have spoken about ports and logistics, but it's just since 2017 that the priorities of China increased, and China started to perceive or to look at the Mediterranean region as a place where to try to reinforce its status as, the green power and the green development power and the innovation and ICT power. If we think about the strongest and most famous initiatives of China, like the Digital Silk Road or the documents for the cooperation with the Arab countries meaning North Africa and Middle East. In strategic issues like green energy and green development, these are all initiatives started in 2017. So actually 4 years after the first strong engagement in China in this region. So why all these differences and different speed in relations with North Africa, Middle East, and Europe? The strongest consideration and the most important fact is that for China, the Mediterranean region is a geographical context. China has not a political or holistic, if we can say in this word, approach to the Mediterranean region. We can say, and we can see also a policy or an engagement toward North Africa, toward Middle East, toward Southern Europe. We don't have a strategy for the Mediterranean. We have always a strategy, China strategy in the Mediterranean. Why? Because, and I would like to thank also President Molinaro for speaking about mind map and cognitive perception, because also for China, this is very important. There are some studies also released by the European Union or inside the European Union project that enlighten very well that there is, in China, there is not a conceptual map, a mental map for Mediterranean. and Mediterranean region as a whole. China speaks about Arab countries, speaks about European countries or Eurasia, if we think in the biggest bloc that China would like to make a coherent geopolitical bloc. China speaks about developing countries or Middle East as geopolitical areas, but there is not at all a conceptual political map for the Mediterranean. And this is actually affecting not just China investments or China's presence in the Mediterranean, but also the perception of China in the region. So Chinese governments and Chinese officials can't speak about Mediterranean as a political landscape because it's not part of their cognitive map, but also because it's blatantly clear that, at least for now, China wants to be engaged in the Mediterranean without being a political actor, without being entangled or involved in the security or political or economic disputes in the region. Why? Because if you have states with different countries, sometimes also in competition one with each other, it's of course more convenient to have a third part and to try to mediate, to be perceived as an interlocutor and an arbitrary in the disputes and not at all one of the actors involved in the Mediterranean or in these disputes. So China is like in a paradoxical situation in which it is perceived by the region as one of the most important actors or one of the powerful actors nowadays present in the region, and that can have an impact on the future development of the region in itself. But from China's perspective, the most convenient way to act is to take a low profile, politically speaking. So to try to keep and to see in the Mediterranean region a local declination of its global priorities, but without having a political entanglement with all the countries. What are the perspectives about that? And I'm going to conclude because I'm finishing my time. Two issues to be taken into consideration. The transformation that the Mediterranean region could or is perceiving after the spread of the COVID-19. Director Albinyana spoke before me and perfectly underlined how much is, how much challenges the situation is going through in this moment. China is looking very carefully about all these developments for trying to understand how its role could be, reinforced, comparing this situation without being perceived as a political actor in it. So being also keeping also this third state, third actor approach. And the second one is the evolution of the relations between China and European Union. China has not at all, we keep saying it, a political stance in the region, but is perceived from some regional actors as strong alternatives to European Union and to inefficacy of some European Union strategies in the Mediterranean. And this is creating also some, challenges for China in trying to engage positively the European Union in the region. Of course, European Union and China has completely different approach. We could debate or discuss a lot about the way in which China is conducting the investment and those all the improvements that China is trying to develop in the three shores that are not perceived at the same time as improvement at all by European Union, etc., etc. But in the moment in which the pragmatism is the keyword for the relations between European Union and China, probably the Mediterranean could be or could become an area in which the two actors can understand if and how jointly have this, new approach. European Union is trying to have a new dimension or a new initiative for the Mediterranean. Probably China could think to support European Union in this process, but also taking into consideration how to protect its own interests and how to being perceived always as the most favorable, most preferred actor or power nowadays in the Mediterranean. I will stop here because I'm running out of my time.
Thank you very much, Francesca. You put on the table, even you put on the table a very, very strategic issue to develop in the coming future. We have two speakers now, and Elena Tosti Di Stefano, which is a research fellow and project assistant on CEMAS at Sapienza University. It's a cooperation among Eurasia, Mediterranean, and Sub-Saharan Africa, sorry. Allora, navigating to competitive multipolarity. 15 minutes, Elena. Please respect the time.
Thank you. Well, let me express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference, to Université de la Normandie, its partners, EURISPES, and in particular to Professor Ricceri. So I've prepared a short presentation, and I hope I will be able to share it with you. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so navigating through competitive multipolarity. So during the various sessions of this conference, we already had the opportunity to deal with the different aspects of this phenomenon. And so with these global scale transformations that basically contradicted that prediction made after the Cold War, that prediction of a post-modern future marked by liberal democracy and multilateralism. So inevitably, as we said, this reconfiguration of the international order confronts the European Union. So in 2003, we have this opening accord of European security strategy that said Europe has never been so prosperous, so secure, nor so free. And this is in sharp contrast with the current diagnosis of a more connected, contested, and complex world where we see the emergence of an arc of instability beyond the EU borders. And this has overshadowed also the aspiration of being surrounded by a ring of well-governed friends. So the opposite shore of the Mediterranean has always been a pivotal area for EU action. But the formulation of a comprehensive approach in this region is a story, I would say, of a long-standing quest and also of an unfulfilled quest. And that's why today I will briefly retrace the evolution of the Union's policies in this area from the Barcelona process to date, also in order to discuss the current challenges and prospects for a more concerted EU approach in the Mediterranean, also in these challenging times. So let us briefly jump back in time to the end of the Cold War, when the European Union started to display its transformative ambitions in the southern Mediterranean, and this by virtue of its so-called normative power, that is its inner predisposition to project externally the European norms of democracy, rule of law, and respect for human rights. And 25 years ago, these objectives were enshrined for the first time in the Barcelona process. And then in 2003, 2004, 9 Arab partners plus Israel were included in the European neighborhood policy. And at the origin, this policy design was largely inspired by the accession methodology, and the assumption was that these countries, by being regularly exposed to the promotion of liberal democracy would have gradually internalized the corresponding norms and principles. However, there is also a general scholarly consensus that at least before 2011, Euro-Mediterranean relations had been largely dominated by realpolitik considerations that were linked to the cooperation with Arab regime in stemming illegal migration, fighting Islamic terrorism, or deepening economic exchanges. And that's why in 2011, the Arab uprisings prompted a sort of mea culpa by the EU. And this resulted in a first review of the European neighborhood policy, where emphasis was put on the promotion of deep and sustainable democracy. And the logic was that the more a country was willing to implement liberal democratic reforms, the greater would be the assistance from the EU. However, the turmoil after the Arab uprisings, also the re-emergence or the persistence of authoritarian tendencies, but also the spillover effects, all these factors led to a progressive deviation from these objectives, and also to the tendency to adopt again a stability-centered approach. And this policy reorientation should be also analyzed in light of two phenomena. The first one is the so-called return of geopolitics, and we already discussed it. And as a consequence, we also have a declining leverage and influence of the European Union. But also, in addition to that, the post-Arab uprisings also shed light on the original limitations of the so-called normative approach. And it seems that the EU acknowledged that maybe the calls for adala, for hurriya, for karama, for justice, freedom, and dignity were not necessarily grounded on the EU conception of liberal values. And because we see that arguably the fil rouge that runs through the Barcelona process before and the neighborhood policy after, at least this until 2015, is the quest of a sort of Europeanization beyond Europe. So in 1995, the EU sought to forge a common European identity, but based on what? On its own founding values. And this was, as it was said, an exercise of normative region building. And this is a quite Eurocentric perspective, asymmetric perspective that was proposed again by the European neighborhood policy. So it is in 2015, with another review of the neighborhood policy, that the EU finally recognized the results, the limited results of past policies, and also the need to revise this approach in a context of global disorder. But it is 1 year later, in 2016, that the EU global strategy broke new ground. It introduced the concept of resilience. Resilience, this term from the Latin verb resilire, that means to bounce back and to recover from shock. And so now fostering state and societal resilience to our east and south, so in the neighborhoods, has become one of the main priorities of the EU foreign policies. And the global strategy proposes a very dynamic approach to resilience that is defined as the ability of states and societies to reform, thus to cope and recover from internal and external crises. And we see that this conceptualization of resilience has three components. The first one is local ownership, that is an effective dialogue and engagement with national and societal stakeholders. The second component is differentiations, that refers to context-specific policies. And third, in the global strategy, resilience is interrelated with a notion, the notion of principled pragmatism, that that means that while it is not expected, it is no more expected that the EU internal values would be adopted externally, it is crucial for the EU at the same time to preserve some consistency between utilitarian conduct on the one hand and the principles defining Europe on the other. And this was defined as a sort of realpolitik with European characteristics. And when it comes to the Southern Mediterranean, we see that the choice of this particular concept and its conceptualization is particularly significant. Why? Because we see an effort to reconciliate the tension between the Eurocentric approach and the stability-centered approach. So in some sort, the EU has sought to strike a balance between over-optimistic liberal state building on the one hand and under-ambitious stability on the other. So, however, in practice, the implementation of this approach in the Southern Mediterranean suffers from a capacity expectations gap. It faces some limits and challenges that are interconnected, and I will mention 4 of them very briefly. The first limit is that during the past years, during the years after the release of the global strategy, the EU has continued to focus on securing its borders, stabilizing its borders by adopting a securitized approach that prioritizes state resilience at the expense of broader societal resilience. But at the same time, we see that the EU is also still too tied to neoliberal blueprints, and this at the expense of context-specific policies. And an example are the ongoing negotiations in Tunisia for the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement that many studies, many Tunisian experts show that this agreement risks deepening economic instability and inequality instead of fostering competition and sustainable growth. So we see that this conundrum between the normative approach and the stability approach has not yet been reconciled. The 3 other challenges, they belong to a wider dimension. So first, we have a very traditional argument, that is the reluctance of member states to communitarize the EU foreign policy. But in December 2019, Ursula von der Leyen launched the new Geopolitical Commission, and here the goal is for the EU is to become a more autonomous actor in the world, that is in the European jargon to reach strategic autonomy. So there are a number of proposals on the table to increase foreign policy initiatives and instruments at the EU level. And so time will tell, only time will tell if this new strategy will lead to greater communitarization of the EU external action and therefore to greater policy coherence. However, third point, at the same time, policy coherence is inevitably undermined by divisions among member states. And these divisions are not only due to differentiated risk perceptions, but also to divergent and conflicting interests. And this marginalizes the role of the EU. And also this vacuum is likely to be filled by other actors. And the Southern Mediterranean is a perfect example. Let us think about Libya. Because of internal divisions, because of different alliances, it was quite impossible to formulate a credible EU stance, and this also contributed to favor foreign interference on the ground by actors such as Turkey, Russia, and not only. Fourth and last point, we see that member states sometimes contradict the very notion of principled pragmatism that was provided by the global strategy. When they follow their individual interest, often economic interest. And for time constraints, I will just mention one example that is very significant and that has been very much discussed during the past years. And this is the repeated violation by some member states of an EU decision of 2013 that forbids the export to Egypt of any equipment that could be used for internal repression. And there are several reports that prove that part of the defense items sold by France and Germany in the past 5-6 years have served to eradicate internal dissent. So this was my last point, and time is running out, and let me just make a final consideration. So we saw that in 2016, the EU has sought to formulate a new paradigm, the resilience paradigm, to deal with its neighborhoods in a context of growing multipolarity. And we saw that this approach is a sort of compromise between principled idealism and unprincipled pragmatism. And also that the implementation of this approach is still met with challenges. So resilience is a word that we have been hearing a lot in the past years in this pandemic context, in particular when it comes to the ability of the European Union to act united and to recover from crisis. So now I believe that resilience is necessarily a two-way and specular concept. And this means that there is an inextricable nexus between its internal and external dimensions. So for me, it is crucial to first secure the resilience of the European project, because otherwise this new paradigm of the EU external action risks to remain, in some cases, a rhetoric compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena Tosti. Many, many compliments for the question you put on the table. Last speaker, Giuseppe Provenzano. You have the authority, Giuseppe.
I will try to. I'm trying to. Voila. Okay. No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Allora, Giuseppe Provenzano, the authority of the most important authority in Mediterranean area.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for this invitation. It's great to be among many people that actually have a lot to say about the Mediterranean. It's great to see again Roger, Enrico, and you, Marco, but especially I found many of the presentations were quite interesting in adding new perspectives. I will try to bring a bit more of an institutional overview of the Mediterranean, and trying to link it to what is going on in the relationship with Asia. So if you allow me, sorry if sometimes it will seem a bit too institutional, but it's important to bring the perspective of what it is an international organization such as the Union for the Mediterranean, which, as you mentioned, is the only intergovernmental institution that is crossing the north and the south of the Mediterranean. So first of all, let's start with so kind of a general consideration. So we know very well that the Mediterranean region has been a crossroad between civilization for millennia. It has been facilitating the spread of cultures, of trade, of religion, and even, of course, of conflicts and empires. But at the same time, different civilizations across 3 continents have met and mingled in this same close basin. They're getting accustomed to each other, getting linked together, and creating and reinforcing the global value chain. Also, the Mediterranean has been traditionally and historically the door of Asia for European and Muslim traders that cross our small sea to visit port cities in the East Mediterranean as the last leg of the Silk Road. And even today, we see the Suez Canal that shows the potential in linking Asia through the Mediterranean with other 2 continents. So this shows the geopolitical importance of this area. Just to name a few examples, I mean, the Mediterranean has remained along the centuries a prized trade hub. especially for sea shipping lanes, as it's been for centuries. It is a biodiversity hotspot for marine life, and it is one of the regions most affected by climate change. This for showing different challenges and different points that showcase the value of this region. So clearly we can consider that there are many Mediterranean challenges and opportunities that could not be tackled individually by countries, but need to be tackled with a real partnership spirit. And the regional dimension of these regions has been developing for quite some time, as we heard today from many of our speakers. So 26 years ago now, in 1995, the Barcelona process launched a new era of cooperation in the Mediterranean basin, joining together in the same forum the North and the South shores in an effort to achieve what were called the three baskets: political and security, economic and financial basket, and finally social, cultural, and human basket. But I'm not going to repeat it today because we heard some of the masters of what was the Barcelona process. This approach has led, of course, to the EU unveiling in 2004 the neighborhood policy, which assigned special emphasis to what is called the Southern Neighborhood. And finally, in 2008, the Union for the Mediterranean, or UFM, was established as an intergovernmental forum for advancing a positive agenda between the two shores. The UFM targets cooperation in what is called the Euro-Mediterranean region, that is, the whole of the European Union, plus countries coming from the north and the south of the Mediterranean, for a total of 42 countries, joining hands for the realization that the breadth of contemporary challenges require common solutions. Along the years, this stance has led to the development of a unique methodology based on three complementary pillars. First of all, we have political declarations. Second, we have a multi-stakeholder policy platform. And finally, projects which are labeled by the Union for the Mediterranean. In general, the Union for the Mediterranean has been acting as a catalyst. It has seen since 2012 the labeling of more than 50 projects. We have had more than 300 ministerial and expert fora, gathering together more than 25,000 stakeholders. And actually, some of these stakeholders are here among the speakers today. Focusing on concrete aspects of cooperation, the UFM has identified a few priority areas, some concrete areas where we can do more together, which are based on human and sustainable development, as we call them. It has a political direction given by UFM roadmap approved by the countries in 2017. During the past decade, we have seen many ministerial meetings along the sectors, but especially we've had the UFM Regional Forum, which is the gathering where yearly the ministers of foreign affairs of the European of the UFM meet together for indicating the way forward. Now, I would like, if you allow me, as we don't have much time, to focus on a sector in short. I mean, I would like to focus a bit more on what is education, employability, and innovation. So, taking this sector in order to highlight the challenges and opportunities we have in this region, it would be useful to have this snapshot of this region, especially when it comes to higher education and research in the Mediterranean. First point, we have a young and highly educated population that is already a strong case for trying to exploit to the fullest the potential of its youth, which is the most educated generation in Mediterranean history. Additionally, the Euro-Mediterranean region boasts more than 33 million students, which is already a very significant number. And finally, now we have the need for a quick and strong recovery after what is COVID. And this call for investing as much as we can in what is, in a way, effective could bring more multiplier effects, which brings to education and innovation. Still, our region is unfortunately no stranger to the global issues such as unemployment, especially youth unemployment, which in this area, given these demographic features, it becomes especially important. In the South Mediterranean and in the East Mediterranean, where 43% of the population is under 25 years old, youth unemployment is among the highest in the world, by contrast. It has been so for more than 2 decades, despite the high level of educational attainment. Again, there are many interlocked causes, of course, but one of these is for sure skills mismatch, which it is the inability of education of talking to the economic sector. This is according to 32% of the enterprise. It is one of the main issues which is hindering the ability to hire young people. In other words, in our region, despite having, of course, many differences across country, political, social, economic conditions, we have a crisis in unemployment and underemployment, especially among university graduates, which could be instead of an opportunity for growth in the region. And unlike in other regions, unemployment is here the highest among those with tertiary education, reaching an average of 30% across the region. This is a point of particular importance that cannot be ignored, especially when we have a strong gender dimension. Yesterday was the day of the women in science. Here in the Mediterranean, in the Euro-Mediterranean region, because no country is immune to this, this is an area where women involvement in the job sector is improving, but it is not where we would like to be in terms of ambition. And this call for action from all of our side. So what I'm describing here is a complex issue of youth and underemployment in our region, which has the characteristic of what we call the wicked problem, which means it's socially complex, it suffers from many interdependent causes, and has no single solution. So we have no magic wand for fixing this. And what's worse, it is being perceived differently by all the different stakeholders. This is an issue which is further compounded by the structural global barrier to career development and employment, which is the gap that exists between academia and business. One way of addressing this is through a collaborative approach, which is where the UFM has a strong competitive edge in the region. Specifically, there is a need to engage all stakeholders in order to reinforce a common vision and a narrative and co-create together strategies aimed at achieving a higher degree of innovation in the region and thus employability. One fairly obvious yet difficult approach is increasing these interconnections, which are still very weak, between academia, enterprises, and policymakers, without forgetting, of course, the role of civil society. We have here the Annalene, Italy. Facilitating the development of such connective issue between all these actors could either help in addressing, I think that the room is closed in 55 seconds. So I guess that we'll have to end my intervention here by informing you that there is a publication that we recently published in the website of the Union for the Mediterranean, where we would like to do more on this sector. And I invite you to a regional seminar that is going to happen this year. We would like to put together and discuss together strategies for increasing the interconnection between the business, universities, in order to create more youth employment and employability across the sector. And if this pop-up is right, I give the word back to Marco.
Thank you very much, Provenzano. Sorry for the limited time. We thank you, the Sorbonne University.
Assignment for my students, because one of the assignment is that they set up a business in Asia, while the challenge is that now the business, inter-Asian business, is more important than Asia with Europe.